Hey guys, Brittany here, and today I would like to talk about my time in a cult. So I grew up in a cult. I was there from the ages of around 4.5 months to 8 years old. And surprisingly, I don't have a ton to say about this topic because I don't have a lot of memories from this time in my life. I have blocked a lot of it out, and I just really have like really random and obscure memories. Some of them kind of seem like dreams, although some have been confirmed by my mom or my siblings, so I know they were real. But yeah, so the cult I was in is called the House of Yahweh, and it was founded by, his name is now Israel Hawkins, but he used to go by, his name used to be Buffalo Bill Hawkins. And yeah, he started this cult in Abilene, Texas, which is where I lived and you know, where we moved to be members of this cult. And now there's just compounds like all around the world. There's worshipers everywhere. And yeah, so he has translated the Bible and basically written his own Bible, and I think they're on like the 10th or 11th version of that now. But yeah, so they worship Yahweh, and they believe that Satan is a woman, is a female god of this world, and has everyone on this plane deceived and, you know, worshiping her and sinning and all of that. And so it was there's like a lot of similarities between Judaism and this cult teaching. So like the yarmulkes, and we used to have to wear like I don't know what they're called, but like things to like cover our hair, and like dresses down to our ankles. We weren't allowed to let our legs show, like a lot of things like that. Kosher diets and baptism, and we used to, like, everyone in the cult has to give like 10% of their earnings to the church. And so a lot, actually pretty much everyone in the cult live in poverty. Like everyone is pretty much on food stamps, and giving a lot of their paychecks to the church, and also like working for the church and like for free, and giving services that way. And it is a doomsday cult. So when we were leaving, which was 1998, everyone was preparing for Y2K, which I'm sure you guys remember, but there have been like countless other things since then. It's like every year they're looking for something else, or preparing for something else. So like everyone had like just piles of like it was like people preparing for the apocalypse, kind of like just bunch of like canned foods, like flashlights, like, you know, anything that you can imagine, like when the world is ending, that you would need. And they sell those from the stores, you know, that they have on the compound. So it's all just like revenue coming in for the cult. And yeah, it's like really, really crazy. It's polygamous. And so I think now only the elders, like the people, that's what they call like the main people, the main men in charge, because of course it's all men. I think they're the only ones who are allowed to marry, but they can marry whoever they want. And so I think it was in 2007 they were charged with like child molestation accusations and things like that. One of the members he went to jail for sexually abusing his stepdaughter. And there's just like, Israel has like so many kids from so many different women. And his wife, actually, I think it was in 96 or something like that, she ended up being excommunicated from the church or cult or whatever, for kind of like putting her foot down against the polygamy thing, because he actually changed the scripture to kind of incorporate that as part of, you know, like Yahweh's law or whatever, so that he could have multiple wives. And she was like, I'm not having that. And so he excommunicated her, and she went on to write a book, and she's talked on, oh gosh, like Dr. Phil, I think Oprah's covered this, the House of Yahweh has been on Nancy Grace, it's been on like all over the news, CBS, all that stuff. So yeah, I'll put links below if you guys are interested in checking that out. It's just kind of like weird stuff that goes on. And it's really sad. There's a lot of child labor. I remember working when I was like 5 years old at some of the places. Like there was a coffee shop that we had that I was working at, and then like the printing press, because everything used to be like printed back then. Um, and yeah, they have their own education system. They teach, God, like so many scriptures instead of actual academics. Although I will say that when I was there, like I remember my first year in public school was third grade, and going into third grade, it was like, first of all, it was a major culture shock, but I also had a lot of information that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten from public school, because they really do kind of teach a lot. My neighbor especially, she ran a daycare, and like, oh God, I was like 5 years old, and I knew like the order and names of all of the presidents and what they looked like and all that stuff. It was just like a lot of kind of like useless information, but I did learn a lot, and it really like sparked my desire to learn, and my love of learning. So I think that was beneficial. But yeah, we were totally cut off from the outside world. Like we weren't allowed to communicate with anyone who didn't support our decision to be in the House of Yahweh. So like my grandma, for instance, like we didn't talk to her, we didn't talk to anyone in our family, actually. So we had no family, it was just us, and which was really unfortunate, because my mom got married, so she met a guy in San Diego, and he told her about this place. And at the time, she had me when she was 18, and she really wanted to raise me with like ideologies and a belief system and in community and all that stuff. And so she was just reading like on all kinds of different religions, and he presented her with this article in the newspaper, and it was like the House of Yahweh, like community, love, support, blah blah blah. Like it just really spoke to everything that she was looking for. And so we kind of left in the middle of the night, as my mom likes to do, and went to Abilene, Texas, and lived there. And she ended up getting married and having 4 kids with this man. And yeah, we were there for 8 years. We tried leaving multiple times and always ended up coming back. And that was my life. It was the House of Yahweh, scriptures, Passovers, like just religion all day, every day. And it was interesting, because when I was young, I was like, I've always had this like desire to search for something like deeper, like a deeper truth. And so when I was younger, that's like the only thing that was really provided to me. And so I was actually really into it. Like all the fasts I would want to participate in, and yeah, it was also very fear driven, and so I was like always trying to make sure that I wasn't sinning, and like I wanted to make it to heaven and all that stuff, whatever. But yeah, it was like quite a culture shock coming to so when I was 8 years old, we came to San Diego, and we lived here from then on. And my stepdad took my siblings back to Texas with them, and I kind of lived in San Diego as an only child. We didn't speak about my siblings, and then I just kind of conformed to this life in San Diego, and there's this whole part of my life that I just didn't even acknowledge really happened. People would talk about childhood memories, and I would just kind of sit there and be quiet, because it's like wasn't encouraged to, actually it was like discouraged to talk about by my mom. I think she had a lot of regret and didn't really like to bring it up, so it wasn't something that I was really able to speak freely about. And I shared with maybe a handful of friends growing up, like up until when I was 22 is when I finally actually like started speaking about it to people. But before that, it was just maybe 10 people in my life knew that I was in a cult when I was younger, and that was really weird. Like it was really hard for me to go through life with this whole like secret, it was like a secret. Like no one knew about it. I wasn't like able to talk about it. I just kind of pretended like it didn't happen, and that I grew up like with a normal childhood, and I just lived in Texas, and that was the thing. Yeah, so it was really weird for me, and yeah, and it was, as I was saying, it was really unfortunate that we were cut off from family, because my mom married a very, very, very abusive man, and God, just recently I was doing a meditation, and this memory popped up of, I couldn't like make out whether it was him or her throwing, those big like casserole dishes. Like, he was either throwing it at her or she was throwing it at him, and it was like going like towards me. Like, I was sitting behind the couch, kind of like scared, because they were fighting really bad, like pushing, shoving, like hitting, all of that stuff. And so I was kind of like curled up like at the bottom of the couch, and yeah, they threw a casserole dish, and it just like went flying into the living room like towards me, and it was just so scary. And so this came up in my meditation. I didn't know if it was like one of those dreams, I thought it was a memory, or if it was a real memory. And I asked my mom about it, and she's like, I don't remember that particular instance, but it really could have been any day of the week, because that happened very often. And that was kind of like my life growing up there. It was like a lot of abuse, a lot of fear, a lot of confusion, of course. And yeah, it was just very strange. And if we had been able to communicate with family, I know my grandma was trying so hard to be in touch with us and to get us away from there, and we just weren't allowed to even communicate with her, and we were told that she was like working for Satan and trying to make us go to hell, and all that crazy stuff. And also my dad, so we left in the middle of the night, as I was saying, and he had no idea where I went, and so I grew up without my father, and I grew up thinking that my dad didn't want to be a part of my life, and that he didn't even care to try to find me or anything like that. And after meeting him and his side of the family once I was 17, 18 years old, I found out that really wasn't true at all, that he was looking for me for a long time. And I did get in contact with him when I was 5 years old. I realized that, so my stepdad in the cult, he's black, and my siblings are mulatto, half black, half white, and I finally like made this, like had this realization, like, oh wait, like I'm different. And so at that point I started asking questions about my father, and we started like writing back and forth a little bit, and but that was like a couple letters I got from him. And then when I was 8, when we moved to San Diego, I was able to meet him, and at that point he had already been on drugs for a while. He was addicted to heroin for many years, and so it just wasn't really something that went anywhere in terms of a relationship. And I really believe that if we had been able to be in contact from like a younger years, like if he had been in my life since I was a baby, then that would have all went very differently. And I could be wrong, but it just seems like it might have been that way. But yeah, so that was like the first 8 years of my life, and it was it's caused a lot of issues in my life, actually. So a lot of body image issues. We were taught that our bodies are sinful and shameful, and we weren't allowed to, like, I remember coming to San Diego and like going to the beach for the first time, and like people just being in bikinis and being comfortable with that, and that was like the most sinful thing that you could do in the House of Yahweh. It's like we were covered from head to toe. I remember one time it was so hot, it was in the summer, and I was over at my neighbor's house, and they were a lot more lenient with the rules, and they gave me a pair of shorts to wear. And dude, these shorts were like to my knees. They were long, like, and I was wearing shorts, and my mom came to pick me up like early, and I got in so much trouble for wearing shorts on a summer day. And they weren't even shorts, they were like more like capris. And And yeah, I grew up with a lot of messages like that, like a lot of messages about our bodies being bad, and it's taken me a really, really long time to kind of like break free from that like belief, you know, because it gets pretty deep down in there when you've been told that since you were a baby. And so there was a lot of that. There was like weird things too, like they talked a lot about aliens, and so it sounds so crazy, but when I was younger I was so afraid of aliens. I used to like check my body before I went to bed, like look for marks and stuff, and then in the morning I would check again to make sure I like wasn't abducted. And I had so many dreams about being abducted by aliens, and it was just so scary because I didn't know if like it was like a real experience that I was like vaguely remember, like the same thing as my whole childhood, I guess. Like yeah, it was just crazy. They talked a lot about demons, and I remember just like walking down the hall being like, you know, when you're walking and you can feel like a presence behind you, especially when you're young. I think that happens like after you watch a scary movie or something like that. And yeah, I just used to be so terrified of being possessed by a demon, because that's like a normal thing that happens, right? Like all the time. There was a lot of that. We weren't allowed to watch TV. We weren't allowed to listen to the radio. We weren't allowed to be really connected with like anything from the outside world, like no media, nothing like that. And so I didn't grow up listening to regular music, which was interesting when I moved to San Diego. And the music that they did have there was funny. It would be like Tupac songs, but like recorded over, talking about like Yahweh's Paradise. Like I remember Gangster's Paradise got changed to Yahweh's Paradise, and they had like this whole like change of the lyrics, and it's crazy. So that's the music I listen to, which is really funny. And let's see what else. Yeah, I remember my favorite show growing up was Boy Meets World, because that was like the only show I ever watched growing up. That and Beauty and the Beast were just the only two things that I remember ever watching, because again, my neighbor, a lot more lenient with the rules. She's married to an elder, so they can kind of just like get away with whatever they want. And yeah, she used to like put those on in the afternoon, and I would just be so stoked, like watching Boy Meets World and Beauty and the Beast, and you know, it was a lot of fun. One thing about growing up there though, which was a positive, is that I spent all of my time outside. Like we weren't ever just like inside watching TV. I mean, except for Boy Meets World. But like I was just outside exploring all the time. Like, you know, we like built a tree house in our neighbor's yard, and we would they had this hill and this big huge tractor tire that we used to like sit in and roll down the hill in, which was really fun. And we just did a lot of stuff like that. And I think that wasn't really the experience for a lot of my friends growing up in San Diego, from what I've heard. So I am grateful for that. But, you know, like there are just so many other really terrible things that kind of came along with that wasn't really worth it. It was just a lot of separation of men and women, and men were praised and women were, you know, it's like don't speak unless spoken to kind of thing. And it's interesting, like with rape culture, how it's like always the woman's fault, you know. That's kind of like the belief that's associated with that, and that was like very much the case there. Like if you're wearing something that's catching a man's eye, then it's your fault 100%. Like and you're the sinner, you're the sinful one. And so that is still something that I'm like kind of like working through. Yeah, that feeling of like not guilt, but like that feeling of responsibility for someone else's actions, which is just not the right thinking, definitely. But yeah, so is my life. The first 8 years of my life. I remember the first time that I told someone that I wasn't actually like really good friends with, that I was in a cult when I was younger, and it was such an amazing, interesting experience. I was working at this place, Casa de Luz, and it was shortly after I went vegan. This place was amazing, vegan, microbiotic, like all that, and one of the women there, she asked me, I don't remember how it got brought up, but it was something about like religion or where I grew up or something like that, and it somehow it led me to say, like, actually, yeah, I was actually in a cult until I was 8 years old. And I just remember her reaction was so like, oh, okay, really cool. Like, it was just non-reactive. Like, I could have just said, like, oh yeah, I had a dog when I was younger, and I would have gotten the same sort of reaction. And that was like before that moment, there was always this like sense of shame that I carried around that experience, even though it wasn't like a choice that I had made. Like, I was a baby when I went there. I had no say in it. I couldn't have been like, hey mom, I don't think this is a good idea, let's not do this. Like, no, I had no say in it whatsoever. I was too young to make any sort of choices like that. But I carried that experience around with me as if I had made the choice and I had brought my whole family there or something like that. There was just like a lot of like guilt and shame surrounding that, and in telling this woman that I was in a cult and just getting that sort of reaction, it was like, like maybe I don't need to carry this around like that anymore. And it was really liberating and really freeing, and it just felt so good to like share that truth and not be met with judgment about it. So I started sharing a lot more. Like, anytime something like got brought up, like, I wouldn't just go around and tell everyone, hey, guess what, I was in a cult. But if it got brought up or someone asked me a question that was related to that, I'd just kind of be open and honest about it. And it totally changed the way I viewed the whole entire experience. And it's been really, really good and really freeing. And it's also really interesting because the people that I grew up with and went to high school with, like, a lot of them, I don't think even really know that this was a part of my life. But all the people that I've met more recently, especially in the past couple of years, like, it's pretty just open. Like, my life is an open book now. And yeah, so it's really interesting. I'm like still kind of figuring out a lot of beliefs that I'm holding about that, like about the cult, and working through a lot of things that I've been kind of like conditioned to believe, having grown up there, and just learning how to change them and work with them. And it's been really interesting. What a wild ride life is, right? But yeah, so that is my experience. I could probably go in a lot deeper detail with a lot of like the trauma and all that stuff, but I'll save that for another video. This is just kind of like sharing that part of my life. And again, I'll post links down there that kind of give you information about the House of Yahweh. I do not recommend anyone actually joining, but it's pretty interesting to look into. God, Israel, he's pretty crazy. He was on Nancy Grace one time. Oh my God, I was like cracking up laughing. He was trying to tell her that the cause of global warming is actually STDs. And she's asking him about like his scientific research and all that stuff, and he's like, oh, we have the top scientists on it right now, but I can't disclose the information yet. Like, you'll be the first to know when the studies are released and all this stuff. And like that's the mentality that they're working with. And he's predicted so many of these like end of the world days, and they don't come about, and yet people are still following him and still believing him. And gosh, I think the last one was like a nuclear baby or something like that, or maybe that's the one that he's working on now, but it's just always something else, like always another like end of the world scenario to prepare for, and then it doesn't happen, and then he comes up with a new one and he has just as many followers. Like it's really just so insane, and it's really interesting, like that there are just so many people that are just so desperate to hold on to something, like to hold on to community or a belief system, and so that they, you know, they follow those things, and it's really sad. And I really, you know, every day in my meditations that comes up at some point, and I'm just always sending them like the most love and blessings that I possibly can, and just hoping that one day the cult will be over. And I know that that's kind of unrealistic thinking, but hopefully they get busted for something. I mean, who knows? There's so much shit going on over there that something's gotta give. But yeah, okay, so I am making this video way longer than it needs to be. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure some have come up, please feel free to ask. I am completely open and willing to talk about anything. And if there's anything else, or like any part of the story that you'd like me to expand on, I know it wasn't a very like linear explanation, then yeah, feel free to ask, and I would love to do that. So yeah, have a good day. Thank you guys.